Hello, we are going to talk about Vikings. History. The Viking Age begins in the late 8th century and ends in the early 11th. The Vikings lived in Scandinavia, which included Norway, Sweden, Denmark and Finland. From there they went as far east as Constantinople and the Volga River in Russia, and as far west as Greenland and Vinland, the modern USA. They even reached the city of Baghdad. They traveled in their famous longships and spread terror where they went, but most Vikings were not actually friendly traders and not barbarian warriors.
Asatron. It's a polytheistic mythology, which means that there were many gods. King of them all was Odin. They believed that he traded one eye for wisdom. The strongest god was called Thor. When it was a thunderstorm, people thought that Thor was riding in his cart and swinging his hammer. The hammer was called Mjolnir. The humans lived in Midgård, the gods lived in Asgård, and the evil giants lived in Utgård. When a warrior died in combat, he came to Valhalla, where he could fight all day long, and in the evening he would sit down at Odin's long table to eat and drink mjöd, a strong beer made of fermented honey.
Warfare. The normal Viking warrior would have been equipped with a helmet, a shield, a chainmail shirt as armor, and a sword as a primary weapon, while a typical peasant would only be equipped with a shield and a spear. They would also have carried a sea axe with a small knife as sidearm. The king's royal guard would have carried a large two-handed axe instead of a sword. The Vikings also used bows, but they were often discarded because they were considered to be less honorable than using a sword.
There were two different kinds of Viking ships. There were the longships, which were used for warfare and exploration, and the knarr, which were used for transporting cargo. The longships were designed for speed and agility, with a long and narrow hull, as well as a shallow draft in order to drop off troops in shallow water. The longships were equipped with oars along the sail, so they could travel without having to rely on the wind. On the other hand, have a broader hull, deeper draft, and a limited number of oars, which were only used to navigate in harbors. The knarr were used to transport cargo along the trade routes that the Viking established.
Viking myths. It's a myth that the helmet the Viking wore had horns. It's uncertain how this myth was born. Apart from 2 or 3 ritual helmets, there have been no evidence of horned helmets. In fact, the horns would have been hazardous because of the Vikings' close combat quarter style. Actually, Viking helmets were made of hard leather with wood or metallic reinforcements for regular troops, and the chieftain had an iron helm with a mask of chainmail. The myth that Vikings only cleaned themselves once a year was made up by Christian scholars that wanted to portray the Vikings as wild-haired, dirty barbarians. Although most Vikings used a variety of tools for personal grooming, such as combs, tweezers and razors. The Vikings also made soap, which they used to bleach their hair as well as for cleaning.
The fall of the Vikings. In the early 11th century, more and more Scandinavian people converted into Christianity. More Christian monks came and spoke to the people. And when Harald Bluetooth was near death, he converted into Christianity, and that was the strongest sign that Asatron and the Vikings.
The history of Scania. Ancient remains and landmarks are scattered all over Scania, from the Stone Age and throughout the Bronze Age. At the beginning, Scania was a part of Denmark, but in 1658, when Scania became a part of Sweden, King Carl Gustav X ordered a harsh Swedification of the province. Due to Scania being a border province, there are a large amount of castles and forts in the province, like Kärnan and Bäckaskog. Domkyrkan was built when Sweden became Christianized in the 11th century. 500 years later, Protestantism was expanding in Scania from a start in Malmö.